As you know, all the members of the general authorities who come to us are men who have had wide and varied experience. This is also true of our speaker this morning. Brother Alvin R. Dyer has been an assistant to the Council of 12 Apostles to the Church since October the 11th, 1958. Prior to that appointment, he was named the previous April as First Assistant General Superintendent of the Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association. He received this appointment while presiding in the Central States Mission and returned to take up his youth work for the church. The Dyer is largely self-taught. In 1934, he became manager of the Heating and Air Conditioning Department of Utah Builders Supply Company, and in 1949 he formed the Dyer Distributing Company, which continued successfully, I might say, until 1955, when he disposed of his interest to become a mission president. When called on a mission in 1955, he was bishop of the Monument Park Ward in Monument Park Stake. Prior to that, he had been a counselor to the bishopric, a high councilman of the Salt Lake Stake and Riverside Stakes. He served 7 years as counselor in the 15th Ward bishopric in Salt Lake Stake and was Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association superintendent in the 16th Ward of that stake. He has served on many professional community committees, as a member of many organizations, and I assure you that if I took time to read all his qualifications to address you this morning, you wouldn't have any time to hear the address. Elder Dyer, we're delighted that you can come here. We shall long remember the fine address you gave the night of our married students' devotional, and we're grateful now to present to you this fine student body and faculty who are waiting to hear your remarks.
President Taylor and other executives of this great university, members of the faculty and the combined student body who are here this morning, and to especially you returned missionaries and to those who are contemplating this wonderful experience. I'm grateful to be here. I feel always in the presence of youth some kind of inspiration, for I feel they have always been the motivating force in my life in anything that I may have accomplished. 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of delivering a short talk in New York City. This, however, was done originally in the Tabernacle in Salt Lake City and placed on tape and then formulated into a program and sent to New York. And I was accused that evening when I was returning from the Klamath Falls Stake Conference and was awaiting a plane departure in the airport in San Francisco of having made a quick trip from New York to be there that night. I've had many letters from people all over the United States about the few remarks that were made there, and the CBS somehow found it worthwhile to reproduce the broadcast this past Sunday. And I want to take the liberty to just read a few of the excerpts of one or two of the things that were said upon this occasion. The success of just about every venture in life depends upon the power of reserve strength. Without it, no army could succeed. In very fact, many great generals with strong frontline forces have been forced into defeat because of the lack of reserves. Banks and industrial enterprises could not exist long without it, and athletes without reserve strength for that final kick in the stretch or when the competition is more keen usually do not go very far if they do not have this quality. In the church which I represent, we recognize that our reserve strength is of vital importance. To us, this means our youth. And what is true with our church is also true with our nation. For the reserve strength of America lies in the caliber of its youth. The development of strong leadership qualities in our young men and women will ensure the strength and greatness of America tomorrow. We feel within our church that you cannot sell our young people short, for their leadership potential is very high. Still, we have found it important to guard against mediocrity and to provide the motivation that will instill the desire to excel in life. To youth and the many privileges they enjoy, but who so often waste their strength in failing to grasp opportunities that are everywhere present, the wise Thoreau has said, "The youth gets together the materials to build a bridge to the moon, or perchance a palace or temple on earth. But alas, at length, the middle-aged man concludes to build a woodshed with the same materials." Some years ago, in the operation of a business which required the employing of men with technical skills, I had working for me a number of graduate engineers. I later sold the business, but I now often think of what became of these men, some of whom I struggled with as to their capabilities. It is sad to me to realize that today, of all these highly trained men, only 2 of them are still following their profession, for which they obtained degrees. In endeavoring to trace the activities of the others, I have found one to be a salesman in a hardware store, another is driving a delivery truck, and still another is working as a laborer for a construction company. There is, of course, no dishonor in any of these jobs, but it is a matter of concern when such are filled by men who trained for and received degrees in engineering. In our church, we endeavor to teach our youth that life is highly competitive and that it is a mistake not to prepare for this reality. The competition with wrong is also very real. In this, as in all phases of life, we must play the game to win. If youth goes down to defeat too often, or in some instances at all, they may lose all. The mistakes that are made about character are often the same type of mistake that prevents progress in other fields. Remember, a good name, as also a good desire to succeed in life, is achieved by many intermediate acts, and yet can be lost by one foolish move. Now, I feel grateful myself, and I always feel a great pride in the caliber of the youth of this church. I have had opportunity to observe the reactions of our young men and women as they come into the mission field and meet the great challenge that confronts them. I have no misgivings about the future of this church because of the caliber of the youth of the church. And if I have a message this morning, it would border on this fact: that the gospel of Jesus Christ, as it has been restored through the prophet Joseph Smith and through his instrumentation, been made available to you and me and others throughout the world, is not a theory. It becomes alive as its principles are placed into operation. And I suppose that my whole life and the experiences which I have had with my dear wife in serving in the mission field and in meeting many situations has served to prove this to us over and over again. I recall the experience when we were called to go to Europe and preside over these many missions there, that when President McKay placed his hands upon my head, he said these words, among others: "The time has come for the people of the ancient lands of Europe to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ." And there was no question in my mind about this, that somehow in the providences of the Lord there were many thousands of people geared to the pattern and the ideals which we stand for as a church, who would respond to our message if we could get it to them effectively and under the power and influence of the Spirit. And I recall also, as I pondered this thought before departing for Europe, that I went to the office of our prophet the day before I left for Europe with Sister Dyer, and I said to President McKay, "Do you have some final counsel or advice to give me before we go?" And again he repeated this. He said, "Only that the time has come." And thus we went forth into this experience with great anticipation, feeling woefully weak and unprepared to do what was expected, but resolved to rely on the Spirit of God and to feel the impulses of that power in meeting every situation. I mentioned an experience in talking to the married students of going to Poland in the interest of laying the groundwork for the microfilming of the archive records of the Polish people, where negotiations continue, and undoubtedly we shall have the privilege of microfilming 75 million images, which include the birth, the marriage, and the death of these many people who lived anciently in this land, going back as far as the 15th century. And these will become in time a part of the vast genealogical research library, from which will come family group sheets and the relentless work of going to the temple and doing vicariously for these ancient people what they were unable to do for themselves because of not having the gospel truths. It required a considerable amount of arrangement to get into Poland, but because we were invited there by the government, many of these barriers were eliminated, and we did have the experience of going there and meeting with many of the officials of the Polish government in this particular field, which functions under the Minister of Education. I recall at the conclusion of our discussions, when we had done all that we could in making preparations for this, that we desired to bear testimony of the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the opportunity was provided for us when Dr. Nowinski, associated with the Department of Education, invited me to tell them something about the church. And so there in one of the government buildings in Warsaw, we held a Share the Gospel Cottage meeting and had the opportunity to speak in German, which these people mostly understand, and we bore testimony of the reality of the restoration of the gospel, of the reason for the gathering of names, for the purpose of the church, and of its system, and of its program, and of its saving ordinances. And these men, and they had invited many of the archive assistants to come in and listen, listened almost spellbound, because this was so different than the things that they were submitted to and the beaten paths that they had to follow under the unrighteous dominion of their political situation. And finally, when the meeting was over, they asked us for literature. This is forbidden normally in that land, but these government officials asked for literature, which we gave to them in German. We then had many hours before plane departure for Czechoslovakia, which we had to fly to in order to get to Zurich to hold a stake conference in the Swiss stake. We were given the liberty of the city and permitted to take many pictures, but there's one experience that came out of this that I want to mention this morning. As we traveled through the city, we came to an area, and Dr. Nowitzki stopped the government car in the midst of a number of very wonderful buildings that had been recently constructed. These buildings were not ordinary structures. They were well built, indicating that the Polish people must have sacrificed other buildings to provide the materials for these, for there is a shortage of materials in Warsaw and in Poland. Dr. Nowitzki then explained that we were standing in the area where once was the Warsaw Ghetto, that infamous place to which the Jewish people of Europe were shipped from the conquered countries, there to await their eventual deportation to the exterminating chambers, which were in the area. And as I stood there thinking of what the Polish people had done in erasing or endeavoring to erase from their memory the terrible experience of this place and the terrible inhumanities that had been brought upon the Jewish people. And I thought of the experience of one of our young missionaries then serving in France, who was in this ghetto with his mother and father. He is a Belgian Jew. And the time had come for them to be taken to the gas chambers. And he came out with his hand in his father's hand. But somehow, in some way that he's not able to explain, from his written testimony to me, he was taken by the hand by someone else and was not led to the truck that awaited them to take them to the gas chamber. And he was spirited in some way out of the camp. He does not even know. Maybe it was because he was too young. But at any rate, he remained secreted in the environs of Warsaw, and he was not found. And after the war, he returned to Belgium. His father and mother, of course, had both been exterminated that day. His stepfather, knowing his parents, endeavored to do everything for him, to give him the finest education that anyone could have. He was taught French. He was taught English. He was taught German. And because of the brilliance of his mind, he became, I suppose, one of the finest young men that we have ever had in the church with regard to the French language. But beforehand, he was visited by the missionaries as he reached some age of maturity. And he told me that he knew the first day that he heard the missionaries testify of the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that this was to be his way of life. And he was baptized shortly thereafter, although his stepfather, a very kind and wonderful man, was not able to receive of the message. Elder Kahn was later called to be a missionary in the French mission. And today, if he has not been released, and at last word he had not been, he is one of our very excellent French translators, having just completed the Book of Mormon in French and many other important manuals. This is an indication to me of the preservation of this man's life for a purpose. And we found this to be true in the calling of many translators in Europe. One of the great tasks that rested upon us in going to Europe was to provide textbooks and manuals for 8 languages in every age classification, where there had only been a meager supply of this, in order to bring to the members of the church the full program of the church. And to undertake this program was a tremendous thing. But I want to testify to you here today that under the inspiration of God in the calling of men to fill these positions as translators, we now have in every language in Europe a textbook and manual for every age group, for every auxiliary. And this has been accomplished only, I am sure, by the excellence of these some 52 translators who have been called to do this work. I'm grateful to report to you this morning that the Book of Mormon has been translated in the Italian language. So has the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price, the missionary program. And indeed, as I left Europe, the plans were underway to go into the Italian areas of Switzerland and preach the gospel unto the Italian people. And though we're not able to go into Italy because of some discrimination and the jurisdictional use of authority, which in a sense violates the NATO regulations, but this matter of discrimination and jurisdiction would prevent us, I'm confident, from going into Italy at the present time. But the economy of Western Europe has been so favorable that I am confident it will be of interest to you to know that more than 1 million Italians have come out of principally northern Italy to go into Germany and France and Switzerland and Austria to take up jobs that these countries did not have the manpower to fill. And as a result of this, we are having many wonderful opportunities to preach the gospel unto the Italian people as they have come out of their own country. And the last week I was there were 5 Italian families baptized into the church in the Lyon area in France. And these people will go back into Italy and will undoubtedly testify of the gospel, and the day will come in the good time of the Lord that we may carry the gospel unto these people. And I believe this is true also in Poland. We had another experience as we left Poland on that day to fly to Prague in Czechoslovakia, as Dr. Nowinski bade farewell to us in the drome or the airport. He came up with tears in his eyes. We had grown attached to him and he to us. And he said to Brother Arnold Seiler, who was my traveling companion, he said, "You men are different." He said, "I have felt a spirit and an influence and a power that I have never experienced before." And of course, this was not us. It was the priesthood of God that we bore, that we carried with us in to these lands behind the Iron Curtain. I have felt and have seen the demonstration of this same power in meeting with the people in East Germany, where under regulation, under the strictest form of regulation, we carry on our church program. The presidents of branches find it necessary each Monday to go to the police court and there obtain permits for the holding of meetings for that week. They can hold no other meetings in East Germany other than that for which they receive a permit. And upon one occasion, In the city of Dresden, our MIA youth leader thought that she would have a few of the young people into her home in traditionally Mormon fashion to have a fireside. She'd prepared some nice things to serve, to try and keep from these young people the pressures and the influence that were crowding in upon them because of regulations behind the Iron Curtain. And in the midst of their fireside, the police came and demanded the showing of the permit for holding the meeting. They had no permit. They were fined 200 marks, which they had to pay, with a warning that if they held another, that the fine would be much greater and the leaders might be sent to prison. In Czechoslovakia, we're not able to hold any meetings. And the members of the church continue within their heart the love of the gospel and hope and dream for the day when they might be able to meet again and feel the association with their brothers and sisters. In Poland, we're permitted to meet, but we do not have many members there now, only about 87, but they still meet, but here also under extreme conditions. Now, I want you young people to know this morning that the gospel of Jesus Christ is a great power, that at the proper time, when this power and influence is needed, it finds its way to serve our purpose. I have before me here a brochure which I'm sure none of you have ever seen because it has been pretty much under wraps until now. The story of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I think that it is wonderful to know and to announce to you here today that within the next 6 months, this brochure, which tells the story of our church in graphic form, in color, and in just a few lines in order to make it clear, will be presented to every important person in almost every known country in the world by a person of influence. I had felt in Europe the need of something like this as I met with cabinet ministers of various nations, ambassadors, ministers of education, and even those who held the sovereign power. And in each time departing from them, I felt what a marvelous thing it would be if I could say to them, I'd like to present you with the story of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm happy and grateful now to tell you that this book has been finished. It has been translated in 10 languages and printed in 10 languages. And with the exception of the Far East and Africa and the occupied countries, will be presented to every king and queen, to every cabinet minister, to every mayor of every city of importance, to presidents of universities, and to people of influence, that the image of our church may be placed in its proper relationship, and that we may go forth in the proclaiming of the gospel of Jesus Christ unto the people of the earth. I bear testimony to you in the name of Jesus Christ that this is His work, and we see the visual demonstration of the power which He has given to make it effective throughout the earth, and it continues to grow. In 1962, the church membership undoubtedly from conversions and from those born and blessed within the church will be increased by 250,000 members. I bear my testimony to you in all sincerity and encourage you to go forward in the preservation of your lives and in the preparation for leadership in this church, and I do it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.